Welcome. This is going to be a tutorial on how to use the mission editor in Steel Beast Pro PE. What we're going to do here is design a simple meeting engagement with an objective that needs to be captured. And that will give us sufficient things to do to exercise most of the features that are available in the editor, at least at an introductory level. Now, one of the things you have to decide when you first begin to think about designing a scenario is where you're going to place the scenario across the globe. Steel Beast comes with a number of maps that you can use, and if you have the military version of Steel Beast, Steel Beast Professional, you actually have a map creator available to you. If you do not have that version, if you're using the consumer version, Steel Beast Pro PE, you cannot create maps, but you can download them from the Steel Beast website. Also, if you're on the Steel Beast forum, you can ask nicely, and generally someone with the military version will create you a map if you can provide them the appropriate geographic details of latitude and longitude and how big a map you need. Now, I like to use the map editor when I'm thinking about scenario design. I find it easier to browse the map that way. And then once I've found the map I want to use, if I need to make some small changes to it, like potentially remove a bridge or narrow the width of a river, I can do them right in the map editor and save off a copy as the map for my scenario. So I'm going to load the map editor up here just so you can get a brief overview of how I work with it. So I'm going to do File Open here. You can see we've got a nice blank map at the moment. And we get a pretty large list of maps that are included with the software. I'm going to use a fairly common one. It's a training area the U.S. Army uses in Fort Knox, Kentucky. So you can see I have the Fort Knox, Kentucky map selected. So we'll go ahead and say open that. Now we'll take the software a little while to create the textures and create the objects and bring the map up for us to browse. So we'll just stand by for a minute while it does that. And there we have it. So as you can see over here on the right in the steel gray area, we have a map zoom slider, which allows us to get a closer look at features and then back off to be able to see more of the map. We have both vertical and horizontal sliders that we can use to control the map. And I can also slide the map, pan the map if you will, by using the arrow keys. So if I press the down arrow key, the map view will scroll downward. Up, of course, goes upward. Left and right do as you would expect. Down in the very bottom right-hand corner of that steel gray area, you can see that there is a small group of numbers. The first line gives the map coordinate of the cursor based on the Steel Beast coordinates, which are the numbers you see across the bottom of the screen right here and down the left vertical side of the screen. That's very helpful for finding things on the map. And then the next two lines actually give you the geographic coordinates that this map was generated from. And this is usually actual terrain data from some of the various sources of GPS mapping data. So you can see here, for example, we're at 37 degrees 48 minutes north and 85 degrees 45 minutes west. It also shows the elevation of the cursor at each particular point. So you can see, for example, where I am right now, it's 134 meters. Now I've already looked this map over, so if we scroll up to the top, we're going to find a big river bend, which I'm now moving into the center of the screen. And that's what we're going to use, and we'll see why here when we zoom in. If you think about most military engagements, people are fighting over terrain for some reason. Either they want to take a particular terrain feature, perhaps they're chasing down a retreating enemy, or in our case, they want to capture a bridge crossing. So in our meeting engagement, we're going to have blue forces coming from the northeast up here, and red forces coming from the southwest down here. And they're going to try to capture these bridges right in the middle. Now, if we zoom in some using the slider, we'll be able to see what we're working with. So right in the center, you can see those thick green lines. Those are our objective. And in order to win this game, you're going to have to capture both of those bridges. So now that we know what we're going to use in terms of an objective, if I put my cursor sort of right around there somewhere, and I look down in the lower right corner again in that gray steel area, you can see that I'm at 92, 86, 97, comma 064850. And those are the grid coordinates for the Steel Beast map based on those numbers that you see at the bottom and left of your screen. So I've made a note of that so that I can quickly find this when I go into the mission editor. Now on this map it's going to be easy because I have the nice big river bend. But on a map that's very cluttered and perhaps like completely wooded, sometimes you can have trouble figuring out where it was you had been looking if you were browsing around in the map editor. So having a coordinate makes it very easy to zero in on that point. Alright, so that's all we need to do here. We're not going to make any changes to the map. We've identified the map we want to use, and we've identified a key point on the map that will help us locate the map when we go into the mission editor. So let's do that. So we'll do File Exit to back out here and launch the mission editor. Once the mission editor comes up, you're going to have a blank screen. We're going to do File New, and that will bring up the same list of maps that we had earlier. Now if you have been browsing in the map editor, SteelBeast does a nice thing for you, and it keeps that map as the selected map. So you can see that Fort Knox, Kentucky is already selected here. So all I need to do is do Open. Once it's opened the map, it's going to give me the boundary dialog or boundary window. And this black bordered box here is the actual piece of the map that my scenario is going to use. Now I can drag this around, I can change its size. So what we're going to do is just put the cursor somewhere in the middle of it and hold down the left button. You notice it turns into a hand, so now I can drag the box. If I touch a border, the map will automatically scroll. So I can just scroll the map around till I find that big bend in the river, put the rough center of the box where my bridges are, and release it, and the box is now relocated. All right, I'm going to just use the scroll bars here to quickly line it up a little bit. And I think this section of ground is probably a little bit too small to make an interesting maneuverable map. So what I'm going to do is drag each border a little bit to make them a little bit larger. So I want to include features that are important. So for example, over here, we probably want to come out to about here. And we probably want to come down. Maybe we'll include this terrain feature here, this nice brown feature. And you can notice that gives us a nice chunk of road here that the red forces will be able to travel on. Up here, road is probably a little too short for the blue forces because red obviously seems to have a little further to go to get to the bridge. So we want to make that a little fairer. So we'll drag this box up to about here perhaps, and maybe we'll take it over to about there. And that will allow us to put blue sort of up in here, which is about the same distance. It doesn't have to be exact. It's not necessarily a bad thing if one side has a slight advantage. That's obviously something you would think about in your mission design. You know, do you want it to be harder for red, harder for blue? Do you want it to be roughly equal? So I think that gives us a pretty reasonable boundary. Maybe we'll make the north boundary just a little bit larger. To make it a little more fair for red. So I think that's a reasonable size. When we click OK, SteelBeast will now go and essentially extract that portion of the map, and it knows now to use that as the base for our scenario. So now we have a blank map. This obviously looks a lot more like the SteelBeast map than the map editor does. Some of the things you want to think about here are you can set the contour line spacing, and that will be the default when the scenario is loaded. Obviously, the players can always change that. So if we go to map here, and contour line spacing, I usually like 10 meters for mine. All right, so that's the basics of getting a map chosen and loaded into the editor. When we come back, we're going to lay down some units for both sides and define some regions and get started on actually creating the logic of the scenario. So I'm going to break the video here for editing purposes, and we'll see you in part 2.